So we are now live, Kevin. What we'll do, we'll always give people another 60 seconds to arrive. And as I was saying earlier, let's hope this one gets off to a better start than my presentation in Jakarta a couple of hours ago.
Well, I mean, it is lunchtime, so it can't be any worse. And at least if it's lunchtime, you can grab a beer this time to get over the pressure.
Well, I tell you what, straight after that, when my machine crashed 2 minutes into my presentation, I had to restart, and they were wondering where I was. I wanted to go and get a Guinness, but that's actually not a Guinness. That's a double decaf espresso.
I mean, that's very, very well behaved, I would say. I'm usually a three scoop coffee man until at least Friday afternoon, and then it turns into beer.
Yeah, good on you. Good on you. Okay, so how are we doing? Okay, so the numbers are building up. We'll just give them a little bit longer. So where are you dialing in from today, Kev?
So I'm currently sat in home office, like many people, in Stratford-upon-Avon. So
Nice.
More famously known for where William Shakespeare's from, which you'll be amazed how many people still go, where's Stratford-upon-Avon? And you're like, where William Shakespeare's from? And then the leading question from them is, who's William Shakespeare? And you're like, I'm not sure how to explain this one to you, but like, it's very famous, etc. So yeah, very popular place, and really lucky to kind of be able to walk down to the river and stuff through these strange times.
Nice, beautiful part of the country. Haven't been there for a while, but I remember it well. Okay.
Yeah, awesome part.
Right. Okay, I'm just checking on the numbers. Yeah, we've got a good crowd. Okay, so I think what we'll do is we'll get started. So those of you who've joined, thank you so much. It's always great to see you on these webinars. So welcome to another working from home webinar with SEO in a Shed with me, Jon Earnshaw. I'm the Chief Product Evangelist at Datametrics, and I'm in my shed where I have been based now for quite some time. And I'm just going to get these slides moving. And yeah, technology, there we go. So today I'm super pleased to be joined by my old friend, Kev Wiles. Kev, you've got a huge amount of experience within SEO and within industry. So do you want to just give us a little bit of background about yourself to begin with?
Yeah, sure. So I have been working in SEO literally since I pretty much left college, and probably like 90% of people in SEO is the classic answer. I fell into it right back in the days where white text, white background, Alta Vista was the key search engine to go to. And have just kind of then moved as things have progressed, moved more into technical SEO. You know, have a wealth of experience in agency, in-house, and now freelance. And that's literally me in a nutshell.
Super. That very mention of Alta Vista brings back huge memories. I remember those days super well. So the topic of today, it's everyday SEO, and you know, I haven't been as excited about a webinar in a long time. So we know that SEO conference season is in full swing. I was giving talks early this morning on the other side of the world. We've got Brighton SEO next week. And when you look at the topics, and Kev, you've spoken to Brighton SEO, you'll know this, you know, the topics get stranger and more technical every year. And it's almost like we were talking earlier, it's like a competition to be discovering the next new thing in SEO, what you need to do to improve. So in this session, what I want to do is really draw on your significant experience within the industry and talk about the stuff that's so often forgotten. Is that okay with you? How does that sound?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you raised a really good point. The SEO industry is full of super intelligent people, right? Like you've got Kevin Indig from an e-commerce and kind of Shopify and his technical background, and like people right down to kind of Greg Clifford on the local point. But I think that a lot of the time, some of these presentations, as much as insightful they are, and those people are really, really skilled, there's not always a need for some of those things. You know, if we take Python as a crude example, being in-house and trying to solve understanding every 404 page as an example, or understanding images missing alt tags and running different scripts and building those things, actually, yes, that's a very good skill to have, and absolutely would encourage people to learn those things. But the time it takes to develop those things probably doesn't outweigh the benefit of running them through something like Screaming Frog or Pi or Deep Crawl or any other tools on the market with some custom extraction and and moving it forward that way. So hopefully this will give some people of like my experience and just give them some tips to move forward.
Oh, I guarantee it. There's going to be stuff that you're going to pick up today and think, why haven't I looked at that? Why am I so busy trying to build this Python script or do something else like that? Okay, so the 4 areas that we're going to cover, why the flashy things aren't always, and I would say are definitely not the most important. Getting the brilliant basics right, and this is that 4-stage process that we discussed the other day that you're familiar with, I'm familiar with, tried and tested. It works so well. Then we're going to look at building a business case and talking about that multi-team integration and breaking SEO out of its swim lane. And also, finally, we're going to look at, what is meaningful business reporting and what does it actually, take to create a report that gets buy-in and has impact. So we're going to begin with step 1 now. You can see there on the screen, mobile indexing, hreflang, BERT, schema. On my word, there are so many things that people are talking about. There's a worry that you have to be good at all that to be good at SEO. Does this sound familiar to you, Kev?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, being in when I was at Halfords, for example, and having that first-hand experience, which, a very big brand that has a couple of different retail websites, different indexing solutions, etc., you definitely start to understand the limitations of some of the things that you would just any SEO would just dub like basic, right? If you're not doing them, you're not very good at your role. But actually, it's only when you get into the in-house kind of environment that you actually understand some of those things aren't easy to do. They've got old legacy systems, they're running an adaptive site, and certain things can't be updated, or dev resources limited, which is an old kind of classic one. And you have to kind of get the business to align with those and do those bits well. But it also is hard to kind of get them to focus on those bits when there's things like voice search and all those other kind of tactics coming on the market that, while definitely are important, I think are sometimes focused on more than just doing the basics brilliantly. So yeah, there's definitely things in here that I think should be done, could be done, but in a kind of prior order. And I think the way SEO is going and getting way more complex, right? People becoming specialists in Python or international or local or content outreach, whatever it might be. Just looking at this, you can instantly start to get overwhelmed, and you can instantly start to be like, hey, as an in-house SEO, I'm never gonna be able to do any of these things or spend time learning how to do Python, etc. And I think you just have to sometimes just step back and go, cool, like doing that, is that really going to solve a problem? And that's where I got to in Halfords very quickly, was coming from an agency side where it's very much deliverable. Going in house, like lots of those things don't help from agency sides, because you need to understand the context of how that business works, right? Like sending lots of 4 pages that are broken on product pages to the in-house SEO manager, while that is something that needs to be fixed, like I didn't control those bits, and therefore, like, hey, I'm not easily going to be able to fix these. So you actually need to do a job of getting those people to buy into it. And I think that's part of, we spoke about this before, is where I think in some regard the agency model, and there are probably lots of agencies doing this really well already, I think needs to also have a kind of air of education to not the internal marketing team, but people outside of marketing, people who don't understand marketing in its broadest concept, so that if the merchandise team are adding pages, deleting pages, adding categories, the kind of very basic things, they understand the implications of what that might be from a traffic SEO perspective, the impact on if you've got PPC ads running live, like everything. And I think as an SEO agency, like if you're a partner, you should definitely try to work out how you get more of those like connections internally within a business, because agencies are the best place, right? Like if you're an in-house SEO, you have a limited experience in some areas, like you need your SEO agency to pull that together, use their experience, use their account managers, use their, like, I don't know, data analysts to help you educate other people in the business. That ultimately means you'll get more done.
Yeah, and you mentioned Python there, and I thought that's a good one because everybody started talking about Python a couple of years ago. I thought I've got to learn that, so I downloaded Python, Anaconda, whatever you want to call all this stuff, and then I realized, you know what? There's a guy called McCain on my team who is a genius at this. Leave it to him. don't waste my time when I could be thinking about something different. So, and this, stop focusing on tactics and focus on your customers. Now, we talked about this the other day, and I'm going to come to that analogy you made about the shoe store in a minute. But do you think we are focusing enough on our customers? What do you reckon? Certainly for you at Halfords, were you?
Yeah, I think there are some brands absolutely doing this and putting the customer at the forefront of everything they do. But I think there is definitely within the SEO industry as a whole, what can we do today to just get us by, right? And how do we just get to that individual keyword that's going to make lots of money and stuff? And I completely understand why that's what makes a business grow and stuff. But I think we need to become more kind of rounded as marketers and go, right, it's not just about being number one for a keyword, but it's actually about brand. If I look at some of the conversations I've had in the past where I've spoke to different people from agency side, I've gone in and pitched for their SEO retainer, the stuff they need, and actually all they're bothered about is ensuring they have owned every single individual brand term, whether it's people also ask box, video Serps, like that's all they cared about. They didn't care about anything else. And for them, it was a brand exercise. They just wanted to be number one. But I think there are other parts where if you're a customer, and I am going to talk about the shoe example now because I think it's useful.
But well, I'm going to move. I'm going to move on to the next slide. So that'll frame it for you. I love this. Do tell.
Yeah, so I think when I look at SEO, and I think the pandemic for a lot of people has kind of excelled this, but I'll never forget when I was younger, the days that I needed a new pair of trainers, and I was like, yes, I'm getting some new trainers. And you went into Brantone or Clark's footwear, and you had the electric machine that kind of clamped your foot, and you knew that at the end of that day, if you were very lucky, you would probably go away with some light up Buzz Lightyear trainers, and you'd be the happiest kid around, right? And that was like an experience, just like going into a Halford store and get measured for your bike, and you can have rockets and Barbies and Peppa Pig, whatever it might be. And I think SEOs need to start to understand what that experience was for individual brands and how you get that online. And there are lots of brands doing really well at this. So B&Q do a really good job in terms of the inspirational, like here's how to use our products and tools to do life things. But I also think there are lots of brands that aren't. And I think a lot of that time is, Halfords is a prime example. We had like 30 odd different categories. Each one had a different focus. Each one needed different content. Each one had seasonality that came into play with it. And it's like, the first problem is, where do you focus, right? Like, where do you focus that time to say, right, we're going to go all in on this category because we need to own it and we need to grow that market. And that becomes inherently harder. When you get super specialists that come on the market that focus on one specific area and they can do everything from, if you talk about some of the brands that compete with Halfords, from how much can you save by commuting to work on an electric bike versus your car, like that's an API call, there's an online widget and stuff. But like, that takes time and development resource, which probably from a Halfords point of view, we can't divert resource to do something like that because we're focused on like a million different other things at the same time. So I think it's about building experiences and understanding what those customers want and then delivering something that matches that exactly, and using Google Insights to basically say, is this video, is this a paragraph, is it a feature, like whatever it is, putting that business case together to say, right, we need some video here, or we need a list or whatever that might be, and just trying to grow it that way, I guess.
And I'm really glad you said that about understanding the customer through the landscape, because that's something a bit of an obsession with me, and I'm going to come on to that in just a minute. So it's super easy to to feel like an imposter. I mean, I do it, and I've been in this industry for years, to be overwhelmed, to be left behind when there is so much being published on Search Engine Land, and all of these other places, and people putting stuff out on LinkedIn and Twitter. So how do you focus? How do you sift out what you need to know when it comes to SEO from what you can safely ignore? Have you got a process or just a gut feel?
Yeah, I think it's a really good one. Definitely the people that know me quite well will know this is something that happened, to me in the last year, and probably to a lot of people being in lockdown and not being able to go to events and just have a catch up with people. But I think the key thing is that, like, to not worry what other people are doing. There are lots of different things that will limit your SEO ability in terms of the growth on the table that are out of your control. Whether that's supply chain issues because of Brexit, right? You can't control that. You as an SEO cannot control product coming into the UK, and therefore if that's going to affect your category pages, having less products, and therefore that might make your average rank drop. I think the easiest way that I focus on, here's the things I need to focus on and keep learning, is obviously pay attention to what Google is publishing as much as you can, where you think it's legitimate and they're not trying to force an agenda. And I think the
Yeah.
other things is I follow key people. If I need something that's e-commerce related specifically, I'll go and have a look at what Luke Carthy is talking about as a crude example. If I've got a proper technical problem, I maybe would go and ask Jon Earnshaw or Barry Adams or some of the other key technical people in the industry, because usually the stuff they're sharing is relevant, right? It's super specialist in that given area, right down to having 1,000,001 blogs connected to a Feedly account that then I filter out and add the individual ones I want to a pocket. I think it's very easy to start getting overwhelmed with like all these different talks and presentations and scripts and everything else in between. But I think it's just, it's good to stay up to date, and it absolutely, SEO moves at such a fast pace, but you can only learn so much. And for me, it was about learning or staying up to date with the key fundamentals, which, if I'm being really honest, I still to this day do not think those have changed that much from when I started, which was, build a great website, build the right content for a customer. We as SEOs found loopholes and ways to change that by like putting white text on a white background for a short period of time. Or, I had sites that I used to work on of my own, that I used to have a directory on my own website that linked out to other people as reciprocal links, right? And I think we as SEOs have made the kind of process a lot complex, and then got annoyed and frustrated when Google's come along and said, we've done an algorithm update and it now takes this into account. But we've made them take, to some degree, we've made them take that step because we've just like taken the mickey, if you like, of what they're trying to do. So I think they, just test and learn. And I try not to spend too much time on social in some regard. It can be very easy to look at other people's charts, and there are people that share them, and it's really good to see that they're driving results, but it's very easy to then get in the realms of like, what are they doing that I'm not? Have I missed something? Am I rubbish SEO? Like, I'm not really sure why I'm not seeing growth. But you don't know the context behind that graph. Yes, they could have done some SEO, but I can comfortably say Halfords saw great results during the pandemic, being an outdoor supplier. So SEO traffic was inherently up. Is that all me? No. But on the surface, I post an SEO graph, it would look like I'm an awesome SEO and I've done lots of good stuff, which I have done good stuff, just to clarify. But yeah, it's very easy to misinterpret what people are sharing, and then start to feel like you're slipping behind and not staying up to date with those things.
Totally agree. I'll tell you what, there is a lot of nonsense shared out there, but those guys you mentioned, whether it's Luke or Barry Adams or Aish, they have great content. So we're going to put all that stuff to one side, and we're going to talk about the basics, the stuff that we're here for, the brilliant basics. Now, I'm just going to run quickly through the 4-step process that you and I are so familiar with, and then we're going to get into some examples. So basically, step 1, that's about the research, finding that area of opportunity. And I speak about that a lot, and I'm going to again be talking a lot about this at Brighton SEO next Friday. Next stage 2, this is planning. Okay, an effective plan to make it happen. Then we've got the implementation, building that business case, getting team buy-in. And again, if you show the right data, that's so much easier to do. And the final stage, evaluate, and then from there we can actually go back and start again, which is why we put all of that into this wonderful flywheel process that we've used for years, our customers have used, you've used it, it's so familiar. But the brilliant thing is, it actually works. So I want to begin with that first phase, research. So cast your mind either back to Halfords or wherever. How did you go about discovering opportunity and potential? What was the process you went through?
Yeah, so for me, I always start with just literally Googling what I think would be the most relevant keyword for that category, right? And that's my starting point. And the reason everyone's got their own process, but the reason for me that I think that's important is, one, straight away I can start to understand the content that's ranking. So I can instantly start to have those conversations with the different teams, whether it's videography, creative, UX, content, whatever it might be, but then start to just map those different things and what's Google pulling back, right? You know, what's in the people also ask box, and then if you've got plugins on your Chrome,
Yeah.
what's being fired in those keyword tools and stuff. And I think from there it's about, you know, building a universe of keywords that you think are relevant to that thing, and that is like genuinely blaringly obvious. It's like, of course it is, you're not just going to focus on one keyword, but I think it's important to have as much visibility of the market overall than just that we want to be number one for these 5 keywords, right? Because inherently I would search very differently to probably how you would search. You know, even like between 10 of us, we'd search all inherently differently. And I think once you've got that, you can start to understand, okay, how often do category pages appear versus, say, buying guides? And within that, how often are people staying on that page or bouncing because we're not answering certain questions and stuff? Pulling that all together, doing the competitive research, you know, understanding what they're ranking for, pulling different content from their blog or across the site and stuff, putting that into a big ecosystem, which for Halford, you know, was Pi, and then working out, okay, like where are the opportunities? Where do we rank low today, and we can improve those bits through internal linking or those sorts of bits, versus where are the new opportunities? And you know, when I joined Halfords, yes, they had covered the basics of like we had buying guides and stuff, but those buying guides were about 100 words long. Now, would as an individual, I don't really mountain bike and stuff, but I can categorically say 100 words will not tell me everything I need to know about buying a mountain bike. And that in its like simplest form is, okay, well, like that has to be expanded, and then we need to go and do research to do the other stuff. And I think building that out for any brand takes time to understand the entities and all those bits that Google are saying are relevant, that give you more content opportunities. But it's worth doing and doing right.
Totally agree with you. And I like a bit of mountain biking myself, and I can tell you're correct. You know, 100 words would not sell it to me, wouldn't meet my intent for information. And talking of intent, you know, this slide, this is one of my favorites. You know, this is a Serp Radar. So what we've done here is, and you're familiar with this, but some people watching won't be familiar, but you take a bunch of search terms over time and ask the question, what does a search landscape look like? And here you can see a multitude of features appearing. And given all these features appearing, isn't it time we stopped thinking just about classic links? I mean, I love that. That's like the Large Hadron Collider. It's an explosion of features. It's on my fridge. And what do I do with this? Well, before I do anything, before I create content, before I push into my ecosystem, I stop and look at the landscape, because that's going to provide answers to questions about my customers. What are they looking for? What are they asking? People also ask. You've mentioned it several times, Kev. People also ask. That feature, you've got to start using that, because those are the questions that Google believes people have on their minds. Okay, it's a reflection of intent. So not only can we understand what they're thinking, what they're consuming right now, that's the basis for an intent-led content strategy. But as you said 2 or 3 times, we know what features to target. And don't just target one feature, open multiple doorways into your landscape. And it's time we started to do that. And then, you know, the things to think about when identifying opportunity, business objectives, the areas of highest search volume, okay, the areas of highest value, because people often don't really care too much about volume, but when you start to talk about value and money on the table, and I'm sure that resonates for you, you know, when you were at Halfords, when you talk about the money left on the table, yeah, does that get them thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. And that SERP radar, you know, is always so useful to, you know, I think gone are the days, sadly, of 10 traditional blue links on Google, right? And yes, those were the glory days, and it was very nice while it lasted. But I think now, I think anything you should be doing should be understanding how you monopolize that first page, whatever that might be, whether it's 3 blue links, a heap of videos, some PLA ads, whatever it might be. I think as SEOs, we have the tools and the data to basically be able to go to the business and say, right, you know, if we take that example, we know that across 30% of our terms, there's PLA ads firing. Are we bidding on those? Are we actively optimizing those from a paid media perspective? And if not, let's do that, because we know that's what fires. And on mobile, that's inherently going to be above the fold, et cetera, et cetera. Right down to, okay, I know today if I search mountain bikes, I'd get people also ask some buying guide in terms of informational content and then some videos. Cool. Well, like mountain biking is quite an adrenaline based sport, so probably you're not going to want someone in a showroom going, and this bike's got 18-inch diameter black gloss rims. You're going to want someone that is out and about inspiring you to go, holy how, I want that bike,
Yeah.
because like look how cool it looks, and I want to be that person getting super muddy, going downhill, etc. And I think you can start to plan your strategy way better when you start to understand what content and what pages you need to create from day one.
Absolutely. It's all about an intent-led content strategy, because the SERP is a reflection of intent. Your content doesn't match intent, you're not going to last. And here we're looking at fashion. We're looking at women's wear, men's wear, and women's wear. We can see, you know, that's the top line here, you know, so we can see that volumes have been up. But interestingly, there's a line there you might not be able to see. That's menswear showed a huge spike, okay, a huge spike in volume in Q4, or revenue potential, I should say, in Q4. I'm not talking about volumes, I'm talking about revenue potential. So we identify the category. So women's wear, strongest revenue potential, straight in there. And then even without going out much, the revenue potential for coats and jackets in women's wear shot up in Q4. So, you know, is this sort of analysis, this is, you were using this kind of stuff when you were at Halfords, weren't you?
Yeah. You know, we use these to not only understand when we should be going with certain categories, which again comes back to the, like, yes, that's glaringly obvious, but I think a lot of the time you can take all the keyword visibility from tools like SEO, Rush, Ahrefs, Datametrics, whatever it might be, and say, cool, we've got 10 million keywords we could move from bottom of page 1 to top of page 1. But if that's related to, say, you know, we're going to move snow chains from position 8 to position 2, but we're in the middle of summer, like, in some regard, who really cares? Because there's no one going to be really searching for snow chains in the UK in the middle of summer. I mean, probably not in the winter either with the UK weather. But you know, you can definitely use this, and in-house you can use this to get buy-in, and you can use this to then secure budgets with, you know, different retailers, businesses work in different ways, but depending on how that budgeting system works, you can go and say, right, we know that the trend is growing, and we know that we need to be number one and owning these keywords at certain times, and work backwards, right? So if we know coats and jackets in this instance is peaking from a commercial point of view around September through to November,
Yeah.
are people researching prior to that? And then how do you build that content for the research stuff way before that customer is searching for the commercial stuff, which is going to convert? Because, you know, that's why retail, I would say, you know, when I drive past my local retail park, the reason I know what brands are in there is because they have massive signs that are all colored up with their brand logos, and you can see them from the road. You need to be doing something from an SEO point of view that does that, so you're in that customer's, like, mindset from research, consideration, and then purchase.
Absolutely. And I think when you show a chart like this that shows revenue potential rather than just volumes, that starts to speak their language. But of course, you have to remember you're still trying to connect with the customer, and it's super important, obviously, to use planning. So with the research out of the way, planning, I think we're all pretty good at planning, and it helps us to remove noise and focus on what's relevant. So having found the high value areas of opportunity, let's talk about some of those basics. And, you know, I've used a bit of artistic license here and a bit of liberty, and I think we had a quick chat the other day about what is the basic stuff that makes the biggest difference, without talking necessarily about actually I did put schema on there, but voice search and BERT and passage indexing and all that kind of stuff. And I divided this up into 4 sections. I put internal linking and on-page optimization, and of course contextual optimization, which brings those together. Does these kind of have I missed anything out of here that you would think?
No, I think this covers the really basics really well. And I think that, you know, for the SEOs that have probably been involved with their brand website as part of a redesign or development from day one, probably lots of these things are glaringly obvious, and they do and can do every single day, right? But you will also be amazed at the amount of brands that can't update their page title because it's locked down and it's not a native function and it's automated and you can't manually create it, or the H1 is dynamically created by the page name, and that isn't set up in a way that's SEO friendly. It's like you as an SEO need to put a business case together to say we need dev resource to solve a development issue for an SEO benefit, which
Yeah.
in some regards makes it harder, because you now can't just do SEO to drive results until that is done and over the line. And that's the basics of SEO, right? We're talking about how I want to update a page title. Well, sorry, that's automated. So we need dev resource to amend the way that the CMS system works to overcome that. And I think if you know, I always say this, but I think as SEOs, we're very good at being able to like adapt and overcome, right? We're very good to say there's a problem. Someone go, there's 3 different ways. We come up with 3 ways to solve that problem, and someone goes no to all 3, and then we come up with a 4th that they can do, right? And I think that's what makes the SEO industry so good. It's we can solve all these problems. We just need to understand what they are, and you don't need to come up with a new SEO tactic or a new like something brilliant. You know, the very crux of SEO and the basics have genuinely, I think, stayed the same. The way we optimize for them and stuff has changed. You know, site speed with the May update coming. Realistically, like if you weren't considering the customer and site speed way before this year, that should indicate that a process and a conversation internally needs to change, because site speed should have been something that's been discussed like at least a few years back as mobile started to get bigger and better, right? Like it shouldn't take Google to say, hey, this is going to be considered more and you need to get on board and fix these things. But as SEOs, we're always here, right? If we look at Mobilegeddon and HTTP to HTTPS, lots of people scrambling and lots of people worrying and stuff, but it's like that is not advanced stuff. Yes, sure, the complexities of how to fix it are, but just having that insight to say, right, we need to fix site speed should have been on your consideration roadmap like way back when, not 2-3 months now.
So true. Mobilegeddon. I remember the Brighton SEO just before Mobilegeddon. Everybody was talking about it, and what a load of nonsense that was. So
there was probably a lot of drunk people at Brighton that time.
And you were one of them. I know that. So and here, just some really basic thing, and I guarantee, every website we look at, every time we audit, and we keep coming back, guys. The basics. Internal linking, okay, let's talk about internal linking. I'm just going to move onto this, and I think it was you that was talking about this the other day. So we got the y-axis and the x-axis. We've got potential impact on the y. We've got effort, the sweet spot, top left. What's in the sweet spot? Well, I took a guess yesterday and just put some things that for me, are there. Internal links. My word, I've got to say it. I obsess about internal links. They make a difference. The difference between page 2 and page 1. The difference between conflict and non-conflict. And talk about internal conflict. I'll talk about that in a minute. My pet obsession. Contextual optimization. Can you think of any other things? Easy stuff, Kev, that goes top left, or in any of the other slots, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I still, this is going to sound really old school, but I still generally believe there's a place in some regard, depending on how manual they are, to be trying to amend stuff like meta descriptions, right? It's super, super basic, lots of talk about Google rewrites 80% of stuff, but, you can still amend those. And if you've got automated systems like in Salesforce, you can create dynamic rules and stuff. Like, you should still be doing those bits to try and influence click-through rate, using PPC data to inform what ad copy works best, like real old school stuff. But actually, if you're a big site and you're getting huge amounts of traffic, increasing that by like 1 or 2% a year, can have a lot of revenue impact. And I think some of those high reward, kind of low effort things, always have to be dependent on the business. There is no point creating a full plan of attack to fix internal linking if you don't even have access to the CMS yourself, because you're then putting the work on someone else. That someone else has got internal KPIs and things they're metric like benchmarked against for their kind of personal development plans, etc. And therefore, like, are they really going to do your SEO task? And that's probably not going to be the kind of shining light you need. So I think that a lot of the time you have to understand those bits, which is from moving agency to in-house is the biggest difference I saw is when agency, you can fire as many issues and recommendations as you want, tens of thousands if you want to, but as an in-house SEO, you know the context between, okay, well, that's not going to get done and that's not going to get done, and certain CMSs can't do Ahreflang very well, so that's not going to get done. But as an agency, you don't really have that context, and therefore you can end up providing lots of recommendations that waste time, don't really build trust with the supplier internally, and don't help you get you to where you need to be.
And it amazes me, Kev, that agencies still do that. Just fire out pages of recommendations, job done, I'll tick the box. But why, where's the checking of what's possible and what's not? Well, I don't know, I don't get it. But top left, internal links, internal conflict, optimized contextually, which takes me on to one of my favorite subjects of all time, an example of such a simple fix. And I'll put a money value on this in a minute. It's cannibalization. I stood at Brighton SEO, I don't know, 6 years ago, talking about cannibalization, and people have never heard of it. So everybody talks about it now. Everybody talks about it, but there's still confusion. John Muller, what was he the other day saying? There's no such thing as a duplicate content penalty. Well, John, you're right, there isn't. But why don't you admit that Google still gets confused when there is content of a similar nature and you just don't know what the hell to do? Okay, it's our fault as SEOs for not sending out the signals. But you know what? We did some research recently, Kev, and we looked at opportunity content sitting on page 2 and 3. And I'll show you one of a high street business. I don't know, maybe they're even tuned in here, who is missing out on £200,000 a week of opportunity. 45% of that is down to internal conflict. Everybody suffers from it. We're burying our head in the sands. What does it mean? You're competing with yourself. Here's an example. Okay, I'll call this one out. My old friend at John Lewis, who hasn't responded to my emails in an ages. Yeah, this will make him laugh. Okay, what do we got here? The keyword is chiffon kimono. Okay, as part of my research, I was researching chiffon kimonos, and we see there we've got positions 1 to 100, and it's the last 30 days. And what do we see? We've got 2 URLs competing. They're not doing anything. Google is deciding, well, one day I'm going to return this one, the next day I'm going to return this one, because it can't decide. And it creates this wonderful glass ceiling. That's perfect cannibalization. That is on my fridge. And I'm going to keep watching that one until they fix it. Talking of fixing it, this is what it looks like when it's fixed. You spot the cannibalization, you spot the internal conflict, and what do? You make a decision on which page you want to return. You fix it, you get back on page 1. Normally, your positions improve. Absolutely classic. But you know what we need to do? All of us, all the businesses, and I can tell you now, people dialed into this webinar, and there is money on your table, and all you have to do to prevent this, and I don't expect anybody to read this, that's I took it from my board over there, is adopt a process of contextual optimization where you think about your ecosystem first before you inject content in. I would love to go through this, but it will take the rest of the session. So here's my plug, and I'm going to drop it in the chat. Yes, it's already in the chat. There are people who work miracles behind the scenes. I'm going to be talking about this at Brighton SEO next Friday, and it will save you a fortune in lost opportunity and lost revenue. So let's talk, and you've got experience with this one, Kev, about building that big business case and getting other people involved, and execution is rarely down to you, and it was rarely down to you in the business, and an SEO sits with so many other disciplines, okay? And we're still guilty of using the wrong language when we communicate with people, but it's true to say that finding an insight, finding an opportunity is just the start of the work. So Kevin, you see it, you've got the data, you find money on the table. How did you used to go about getting that buy-in? What worked for you?
Yeah, so I think I guess there were 2 ways. Depending how the business is structured, it will depend on how you could go and try and fix those things. But I think building internal relationships with those people and understanding their specific KPIs, what makes them tick, when are they going to be under pressure, if they're coming into Black Friday, don't go and ask your merchandise team to do some SEO stuff, because it won't be like, you won't be greeted very nicely, versus trying to understand holiday calendars with when are most of the devs out of the office, and therefore don't go and ask for big dev resource. Like, all of those things aside, I think the key thing for me is, if you're in an e-commerce business or retail, those typical businesses have buying departments, and if you can get a buyer behind you to say, we absolutely want to do this with our category, it's much easier to get that to filter down, because they usually own lots of the kind of, and pull lots of the strings around how they should be merchandised, how they should be added to the site, what sort of content do we want to push out, what PR are we doing, which from an SEO point of view, you can get involved in each of those bits, and you can go, cool, well, from a PR point of view, if we're going to do some cool campaign offline, how do we get it to work from an SEO point of view, and I get some nice links, versus what content can the supplier give us, but we can retweak and amend to make our descriptions better, right? And that usually becomes a lot easier, but you have to understand that those people aren't marketers. They don't talk marketing language, let alone SEO language. And I think overall, as an SEO industry, we're very, very good at talking about issues and talking about the complexity of those issues, but not very good at talking about them in a way that someone like my grandma or mom would understand what I'm talking about. And I know that, if many of conversations, like lots of people, parents and probably friends think I work in IT, and you're like, not really, but same thing. But that's because we've inherently made it that way. We've made it like we do this really crazy dark art thing, and we sit in a black box every day, and we just like type on a computer and some magic happens. So I think building those presentations or insights in a way that aligns with what their goal is. If you're taking on a new product range, the goal is probably to show to the business you're stocking that they've made the right decision to stock with you, and therefore, is it about market share? Is it about impressions? Is it about traffic? Is it about revenue? And all of those will depend. Different teams at Halfords had very different KPIs. Some were concerned about revenue, some were concerned about market share. You had the classic of like, hey, the vanity stuff, or we just want to own that given keyword. Like, if you can talk in a way that aligns with those stuff, you will get things done easier, rather than the classic of trying to sweet talk everyone with sweets and donuts and pizzas and stuff. I think there's a place to build those things from a relationship point of view, but eventually you'll either be bankrupt because you've spent all the money on beers and pizzas, or they'll just know that they can say no, and you'll try and like bribe them, I guess. But you're not building longevity, you're not educating them as the value of what SEO can bring. And that education piece for me is the thing that holds SEO from being a single like team, micro team, whatever it might be by itself, to being integrated as part of a business. And when I try and talk about SEO to people that don't get it, I kind of refer to it as like the roots of a tree, right? It can hold everything together. You can help the business understand what people are searching for. If we look at the pandemic, what are people searching for related to products in that business? There's obviously a cost for people calling into the customer service center. Like, give the business that information. The SEO team has given the information that says, these are all the things being asked. We should create content, and we can reduce customer contacts into the business, which means you're not doing traditional SEO, but you're still saving the business money. You're making them more profitable, and therefore, if they're making more money, you're still technically doing what you're employed to do, which is like revenue, right? Making them more profitable, bringing in more revenue. I think we very quickly get caught up in chasing the latest trick and chasing that number one keyword. And in reality, I just don't think it's always the only thing you can look at. And people want that data. SEOs are very lucky that some of the great tools like Pi and other tools in Google Search Console, as much as Search Console and stuff restrict various pieces of data, they also give us invaluable data that for non-SEOs is stuff they sit there and go, I wish I knew the answer to this question. I wish I knew the answer to this question about how we plan the next product line. We can come along and go, I can give you all that, but I need you to work with me on this, this, and this. And that's how I usually try and get buy-in and do those sorts of bits.
I love it, and I love what you said there about we've done this to ourselves. No, nobody talks to the SEO guys or the SEO people, the team at a party, because all they're doing is talking about all the problems they've discovered. Hreflang, canonicalization, to put on a nerdy voice, and we do that, and we love it, but no one cares. So let's change the language we use. Let's start talking about value. Let's share insight that will help intent-led content strategies. You know, there's so much wonderful data within the SERP landscape that we can leverage. So super important to talk to others about how SEO can solve business problems, but don't come to them with problems. Don't say, I've discovered an increase in 404s. Nobody wants to hear that. You're just going to get the door shut in your face, aren't you? You know, as exciting as that might be. So, you know, I think we're almost coming to the end here. We've got a few more slides. Now, you know, we've talked about buy-ins. I think you mentioned a help center example. Can you remember that one, or did I imagine that?
No, yeah. So, you know, I think we, when we were at Halfords, we used SEO data to inform those. How do we create, or not even really create content, but mark up content in the way that Google pulls it back from featured snippets? You know, where it's a customer service number, or answering questions about, is it, you know, can I pick up from store, whatever it might be in the pandemic. You know, you can use those insights to solve other things outside of your just like small remit. And I keep saying it, but I think it's, you just need to educate those people. You know, if it's a merchandise issue, and this sounds blaringly obvious, you know, they will be tasked, some businesses will be tasked to make sure those categories are optimized. And if they've only got one or two products, how do they make them more enriched, because they have bounce rate metrics and stuff they need to solve, and they might not easily be able to go out and find all those categories, right? So go and solve that problem for them. Use SEO tools to give them that report that says, here's all the category pages that are empty, combine with GA data, build that report, get them on board, you know, and that will help you grow and do new stuff, right? You know, similar to, again, depending on how your CMS works, we've got products that shouldn't be online, but accidentally have been left online through a process error. They're not buyable. Is that impacting our health? Is that, you know, pulling down the overall category? Is it having a high exit rate because people can't buy things and therefore they're getting frustrated? And while people might not care about that, if someone's coming to your site because you've got a product listed in Google and they can't buy it, eventually they're going to go, that brand's not really great because they just don't have anything in stock. You know, I've had it where I used to use a supplier all the time, then he started keeping products online, but they weren't buyable. Everything I wanted to buy from them was always out of stock, which isn't a problem, but find a way to solve that. You know, send me to a different product, upsell me to the next level product, or downgrade me if there's not one applicable. But again, solve those problems. Understand the micro teams within like the content function or the buying function. And you only need to get, you know, Halfords is a huge business, but you only need to get one or two people on board before people talk at the coffee machine, when that was a thing we were allowed to do. And then you'll start to get interest, and then people will ask you questions, and then you'll have them come to you rather than you trying to push it uphill.
Solve problems, don't come with problems. And that's what we've been doing for too long. And you know what? If that doesn't work, we can show them the money. And I've just got this great example I found yesterday of a big online business in the UK who's leaving money on the table. I'm going to show you how much. I might even name them. Haven't decided yet. The name was, oh no, I didn't want it to start. I don't know how that started. Anyway, but okay, here's an example. So as you can see, it's fashion, it's accessories, kids wear, men's wear, non-gender specific. So this is a business that sells lots of fashion wear. And you know how much of their content is sitting on page 2 and 3 right now? Big, high volume, traffic driving, revenue generating content. And that's illustrated in the chart there by those pink areas. That's worth £200,000 a week alone. If anybody wants to know, just type a message in there, and I'll tell them who it is. Maybe they are dialed in. I can't see all the attendees. But this is so typical. This is so typical. And you know what the vast majority of this content is? It's conflicted. We can fix that. We fix it with internal linking. We fix it with good theming. We fix it by deciding on the doorways into our world and don't leave that up to Google. Why is everyone still doing that? I just don't know. It perplexes me. So that's an example. If nothing else has worked so far, you want the buy-in, you show them the money. And you know what? You're welcomed into the boardroom. You're welcomed into the C-suite. What? You can give us that money? Yeah. Don't tell them how you're going to do it. Don't tell them that we've got this problem with cannibalization and stuff like that, because then they'll switch off. Just say, money, it's yours. Do you want it? I can do that. That's what SEO does. You know, it doesn't have to be magic. And finally, meaningful business reporting. And I just want to show a really nice chart, a chart that I love. And this is, I think I've blanked it out, but it's one of my clients, and this is their share of voice. Now, when you report high, you don't talk about visibility. You don't talk about page one. You don't talk about Google, but you say, you know, all that money you're spending on content and all those editors and all that people writing the content and people like Kev, you know, so all of that money, okay, we talk about value. That content is giving you a share of voice. And this business in the past 12 months has gone from a share of voice of, or a rank of 6, all the way up to a rank of 1. And they've done that because they've continually targeted the value content. So here we're taking search terms. We're looking at the search volume, the cost per click, how competitive these terms are. And we can now speak that language of volume. And I just think that's such a great success trajectory of the business that's changed the language they use, and there's targeted volume. So I just want to hand over, Kevin, for your final 3 top takeaways. What are you going to leave us with?
Yeah, so I think for me, the first one is get aligned. And, you know, I think by that, I mean, understand what those teams' problems are, right? If I use a health as an example, they had probably 15, maybe 16 sort of like micro teams within any given function, and understand what problems do they have that keep them up at night that you as an SEO can solve, and work backwards to that before you push your agenda. And like you said, go to them with solutions, not problems. And, you know, if that's a monetary value, like you said, don't then talk to them about the kind of nerdy SEO stuff. Just, this is what it is, and we can give you this, and then kind of get on with it. I think the other part is, particularly with the developer side, there's lots of talks about this that cover way more detail than I ever could. But, you know, start small. Think of something that you know will show value, you know will show money, pound signs in Google Analytics, if that's what you're reporting out of, that you could get done very easily with little buy-in, and build the trust up from there, right? And, you know, not every SEO test is going to show increases, some fail, and that's the whole purpose of SEO, is kind of test and refine. So start small and then grow. And I think the third thing, which I think is a really key one, is that, like, just relax. Like, SEO is tough. SEO is getting harder. You know, it's very easy to get caught up in things like imposter syndrome and you know, kind of self-doubt and stuff because of constraints that are outside your control. And I think if you're ever in those situations, like, everyone probably at some point in any career has been at that point. But the benefit, I think, from the SEO industry is that 99% of people are very friendly, very open to, you know, just have a chat on Twitter or privately if that's how you feel. So, like, just relax, outreach to people, and just, like, keep doing what you're doing, really. And just, if you get stuck, avoid reading Google guidelines, because they're not always the right thing.
Oh, it's a terrific document, that is. I totally agree with you, Kev, about the community. It's super friendly, and on that note, people can reach out to you. They can reach out to me, you know, if they've got questions. You know, we welcome that conversation. And, you know, I'm just going to finish on my top 3 takeaways. The first one: look at the landscape. The answers are in there. The answers that will enable you to build a content or an intent-led content strategy, and also you'll understand what features to target. And don't just think about, are we on page 1? Open multiple doorways. You should be on page 1 multiple times. And, you know, the big one, practice contextual optimization. And again, as I said, you know, next Friday, the link's in there somewhere. I'm going to be talking about that at Brighton SEO. So just to finish off with, you know, I do have a newsletter, SEO in the Shed. I don't think you can click on that, but search for SEO in the Shed news, and you'll find that. Sign up, and there's loads of research, interesting stuff, and charts that you can print on your shed and stick there. So with that, I just want to say, Kev, thank you so much for coming on the webinar. I've loved listening to you and hearing about all of your experience and your wonderful insights.
No problem at all, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk and just ramble about SEO for an hour.
Not at all. It's not rambling. It's good. It's good. And I just want to say, for people who are listening, and there's still a whole bunch of people listening, and he's not going to say it, but I'll say it. Kev, okay, hugely experienced talent in the SEO industry. If you need somebody, you're looking for somebody right now, then get hold of this guy before somebody else does, because he can bring incredible value to your business. That sounded like a sales pitch, didn't it? But you know what? I actually meant it, and I know that you are, you've left Halfords and you are, looking for other opportunities now. So I said it for you. So there we go. My pleasure. So thanks for everyone who's joined in. As always, we'll get another SEO in the shared webinar out soon, and we'll see you all soon. See you at Brighton SEO on Friday. Did I mention that?
See you all.
Cheers.